Thoughts and emotions are low frequency. Now, if we start to rise above body consciousness, we move from thinking to knowing and from emoting to loving. And that cannot be fed upon. And they know that. So when you work with yourself optimally, they're defeated automatically. If you don't work with yourself optimally and you keep emitting thought patterns and emotional patterns, this is actually the chi that they feed upon. And this is actually what creates the matrix, because we believe it to be real and true. And our reality is created based upon what we believe to be real and true.
You mentioned before as well that we choose our body. We choose the timeline we're in. We choose the planet we're in. We also choose the team that we get put in. That was something that really stood out to me in terms of the team. Are we talking like NBA league where there's like many teams, or is it like one versus the other team? What has that been like for your experience?
It's more, and we can simplify it, which helps and doesn't help sometimes, but more, are we directly working towards the expansion of consciousness and the liberation of humanity? Or are we directly working towards the subjugation of consciousness and humanity, and what I call perception management, managing everything so humanity stays in the dark about everything? Now, the darkness, when we play for that side, by putting pressure, subjugation, tyrannical pressure upon the consciousness, that actually causes evolutionary tension, which actually causes people to wake up. Right? I mean, that's so it's still serving, you're still serving the other side, but you're not doing it directly. You're doing it indirectly. So when I talk about what team you play for, you can think of like what you're doing. You are directly working with helping humanity evolve its consciousness and liberating itself. You're doing it directly. Right? And there are people that are doing the opposite of what you're doing, spreading lies, misinformation, trying to control, and on and on and on, right? So directly, they're trying to hold it down. Both end up serving the evolution of consciousness anyway. But that's what I mean or meant about playing one side of the team or the other. And we literally get to choose this. And most of us have played both sides many, many times. I know that might be difficult for people to hear. You're leading a very centered, holistic, heartfelt, heart-led life. I guarantee you've played a bad guy. I guarantee you've played a bad guy. We play all of them.
Even in this lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Even in certain moments and periods of our life, we might play that role with another person, or vice versa, and then we switch up the roles. There's a belief system that you call the debt slave reality. And I was like, was he talking about the 9 to 5? What do you mean by the debt slave reality? And how did this conception of this belief system come to be?
You sure you want me to answer that?
Go as deep as you need, brother.
All right, my friend.
As deep as you need.
You got it. Okay. All right. So let's first give context. Okay. So let's talk about what a parasite is. Okay. So most of us know what a parasite is, right? It needs a host and it feeds on it. And then that parasite can, and often does, take control of some of the functions of the host. A parasite can make you crave sugar. It can make you crave certain foods, right? When most of us know this, right? All right. That's kind of what's happening. That's what I said. That's kind of what's happening on a larger scale. There are beings, and unfortunately, there's many humans that assist in this, which is actually how we get to where we are now at this moment. Many beings assisting in this. There are actual beings that exist in a higher frequency and can lower themselves and feed upon what it is that we're doing. They feed upon our energy, and they need a host. And that really where this debt slave mentality actually comes from that. That's literally what it is. This has been going on a very, very long time, And if we looked within ourselves deeply, we would realize, like the books that I write, if you look inside yourself deeply, you will shed yourself of this debt slave reality that we have willfully projected ourselves into, that we have willfully, intentionally, including me, you, and everybody here. We know this is the deal before we get here. We know this is the deal before we get here, because it's an incredible experience and it forces the evolutionary tension for us to work with ourselves more optimally and more powerfully. And that is the evolution of consciousness, because we leave here with a sturdier back and a more tender heart. That's really what evolution is. So there are parasites that work on our consciousness and our body of energy through harnessing our attention, by harnessing our attention. And our attention is energy. And that's why they have us look over here, look over here, look over here. And it's always bad. It's always bad, right? They want you backed up, fearful, and angry. They want you to believe what it is that's put out there, because once you believe it, you actually create it for them. We create the matrix. The matrix is inside your mind, and you actually create it for them. So the debt slave mentality does have to do with parasitical type entities that operate, whose intellects are far superior to the human intellect that we're currently using in this timeline. It's not superior to our higher mind at all. But to our intellect, absolutely. So once we learn how to detach and discern, they won't be able to harness our attention, which is energy. And once they don't have our attention, which is our energy, then we have our energy to do just what you said, to create as who and what we are, a limitless, immortal fractal of God, rather than a host for parasitical entities. Now, I could go further and further and further and darker, but it's not necessary. And let me just say two more things about this, Emilio. These parasitical entities that I'm talking about, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed at all. Okay? That's number one. Number two, when you work with yourself properly and optimally, they can't do a thing. They can't touch you. That's why raising your frequency, you go up and beyond body consciousness. You surpass the ego-mind identity, which is built upon and with the electromagnetic interference of what is broadcast here, the matrix, which is what forms the ego-mind identity, the EMI, the electromagnetic interference. When you raise your frequency by turning your dial, you're not affected by what goes on here. That's the key, to raise your frequency, to ascend the frequencies. And then these parasites that actually feed upon thoughts, emotions, low frequency. Thoughts and emotions are low frequency. All of them. Thoughts and emotions are low frequency. Now, if we start to rise above body consciousness, we move from thinking to knowing, and from emoting to loving. And that cannot be fed upon. And they know that. So when you work with yourself optimally, they're defeated automatically. If you don't work with yourself optimally and you keep emitting thought patterns and emotional patterns, this is actually the chi that they feed upon. And this is actually what creates the matrix, because we believe it to be real and true. And our reality is created based upon what we believe to be real and true. But it's absolutely energy harvesting through our attention.
And what does what you just outlined there, have to do with why masters will advocate for fasting, for meditation, for mastering our attention and our energy? And how can we head in that direction as well to gain control over this and raise our frequency?
Okay, great question. Again, okay, so every authentic master and mystic yogi, they all talk about two things, don't they? Meditation and fasting. Why? Because it works. They talk about, that's why, because it works. Okay, so meditation and fasting is the purification. It's the absolute purification of mind, body, soul. That's why it works. So think of food as information. It's all information, but think of food as information. So every time you eat food, your body has to decode information. Most of what passes for food on this planet is not food. I mean, most of us know this, right? It's not food. The soils have been tampered with, the water, everything, right? Okay. So fasting and meditation will allow you to heal yourself, purify yourself, and raise in frequency, because food also lowers your frequency. That lowers your frequency. Meditation allows you to move past the pattern subconscious egoic mind into your higher mind, into who and what you really are. So we purify body through fasting, and we purify mind and spirit through meditation. So meditation and fasting will allow you to overcome anything. I don't care what it is. Doesn't matter what it is, because it's all energy. It all can be commanded properly. But those two things, to every authentic mystic and master, are the key, and that's why they all talk about it. It is your purification and your ascension through meditation and fasting.
In your self-healing from the paralysis, were you fasting during that moment? Because I know you were meditating, hours in the day. Were you refraining from food as well in that process?
Initially, when I was after I became paralyzed, I wasn't eating much. I was still in the hospital. I was in the hospital and then in the rehab for a total of something like 2.5 months. I'd have to run the numbers in my head. So I was being fed, but not much, and I didn't want to eat much. But I was so weak from the sepsis that I couldn't completely fast, because I think I just wouldn't have been able to perform in the rehab. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I was so weak to begin with. But I was eating very little. I was eating as little as I could. And then once I was in a constant state of meditation, perpetual state of meditation. And once I was discharged, and I was able to unparalyze myself fully about 2 or 3 weeks after, it was exactly 100 days after being discharged, I then went on a strict fast because my main obsession was unparalyzing myself. And then once I did that, I wanted to address fasting. So then I did 14 days of no eating of anything. I had a very small meal, only what I could kind of handle at that point, maybe about 400 or 500 calories. And then I fasted again for another week. So I really didn't eat for 3 weeks. And that kind of reset all the damage that had been done through the sepsis. I was diagnosed with all these different chronic diseases. I mean, they disappeared. They just disappeared. Now, part of it is from the fasting. The other part is the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique. And one of the things you do is you learn how to turn off the program of illness. Just like you delete a program from a computer, in a higher state of consciousness, you can actually turn off the programs that you're running. So that was also one of the things, as well as the other steps in the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique. But fasting and meditation, there's nothing that can't be cleansed. Nothing that can't be cleansed through fasting and meditation. And if anyone is thinking about fasting past, like 24 hours, this kind of thing, do it with someone who's supervising you, someone who's with you, okay? Because you can get dizzy, you can get weak, you could have low blood sugar. I mean, we have to be mindful of this, okay? So if you're interested in that, make sure you do it under supervision. But I can't recommend fasting enough. If it's done properly with supervision, you check your blood sugar, you check I was constantly checking everything when I was doing this, because I barely ate for 3 weeks. I had one tiny meal in 3 weeks. So I wanted to make sure, and I got dizzy several times. Several times I got dizzy. I remember one time I stood up, I had to sit right back down. I got so dizzy, right? But you'll also know, let me just add, you'll also know when it's time to eat. You'll know when it's like, you know what, I better eat something. So I remember that feeling. I was like, you know what, I better eat. It's time to eat now. So, but you can reset everything. I got rid of all those genetic chronic diseases, which are impossible, through the Ascend the Frequencies technique and through fasting.